The Wild West, a time of gunslingers, gold rushes, and saloon brawls. Or was it? Did you know the Wild West was actually a lot wilder and weirder than Hollywood would have you believe? Today we're uncovering 10 crazy facts about the Wild West that will blow your boots off. Ready to saddle up? Let's ride! 1. The Wild West wasn't that wild. When you think of the Wild West, you probably picture shootouts at high noon and lawless towns overrun by outlaws. But here is the crazy part. It wasn't nearly as wild as the movies make it seem. In fact, the average frontier town had fewer than 2 murders per year. That's less than some modern cities today. Turns out, people back then were more likely to settle disputes with a drink at the saloon than a duel in the streets. Did this surprise you? Let me know in the comments. 2. Bank robberies were super rare. Despite what westerns might show, bank robberies were almost non-existent in the Wild West. Why? Because banks were well fortified, and outlaws knew they'd have to face an entire town of angry locals with guns. The famous James Younger gang even failed spectacularly during their attempt to rob a Minnesota bank in 1876. Spoiler alert, the townsfolk fought back hard. 3. The Wild West had more diversity than you think. Hollywood would have you believe every cowboy looked like Clint Eastwood. But here's the truth. About 1 in 4 cowboys was black, and many others were Mexican, Native American, or Chinese. The Wild West was actually a melting pot of cultures, with people from all over the world seeking fortune and freedom. Talk about rewriting history, huh? 4. Quick-draw duels were mostly a myth. You know those dramatic quick-draw duels where 2 cowboys square off in the middle of the street? Yeah, those didn't really happen. Most gunfights were ambush or brawls, not gentlemanly standoffs. And let's be real, would you really risk your life over a staring contest? 5. Women were total badasses. Think the Wild West was just a man's world? Think again. Women like Calamity Jane and Annie Oakley shattered stereotypes, proving they could shoot, ride, and survive just as well as any cowboy. And let's not forget, many women owned businesses, ran homesteads, and even worked as doctors. Ladies, can I get a yeehaw? 6. Bar fights were surprisingly tame. Despite the iconic image of smashed chairs and bottles flying, most saloon brawls ended before anyone got seriously hurt. Why? Because breaking stuff was expensive, and no one wanted to foot the bill. Instead, arguments were often settled with arm wrestling or games of chance. Who knew? 7. Cowboys weren't big fans of guns. Believe it or not, many towns in the Wild West had strict gun control laws. Yep, you had to check your weapons at the sheriff's office when you came into town. Cowboys didn't walk around armed to the teeth. They were more worried about cattle than shootouts. Bet you didn't see that coming. 8. The gold rush was a scam for most people. The California gold rush promised riches beyond your wildest dreams. But the reality was not so shiny. Most prospectors barely found enough gold to cover their expenses. The real winners? The merchants who sold tools, supplies, and overpriced whiskey. 9. Native American contributions were overlooked. The Wild West wouldn't have been possible without the knowledge and contributions of Native Americans. From trailblazing routes to teaching settlers survival skills, indigenous people played a huge role in shaping the frontier. Sadly, their contributions often went uncredited in history books. 10. The Wild West era was surprisingly short. Despite its legendary status, the Wild West era lasted only about 30 years. That's shorter than the lifespan of most cowboys. By the late 1890s, railroads, law enforcement, and industrialization had transformed the frontier into, well, a lot less wild. But hey, legends last forever, right? Watch our other videos for more crazy facts.